we're going to be talking about two specific biotech company startups here and the journeys that they've had, Immobazyme and Fluorobiotech. But really, the session is really to broaden the horizons on the different types of enzymes that you're going to need and the different reasons you need them in Africa. And my version of the story, I met the groups in the room, is I was at the MRC at the time. When COVID hit, we won this mRNA Hub award with the WHO. We started to make mRNA vaccines, and we couldn't get any of the enzymes we needed to make the vaccines in Africa. So 9 enzymes you need to make an mRNA-based vaccine, and none of them came from Africa, and 2 of them were really expensive. So Africa was really being beholden to the fact that we couldn't get enzymes to make vaccines. And that's not South Africa, Senegal, the world had a shortage of it. So that was how we realized enzymes are very important. But everyone who thinks enzymes thinks of pharmaceuticals. It could be cosmeceuticals. They could be nutraceuticals. They could be for the agricultural sector. They could be for beer. When you're making beer and you're fermenting, to make a wine, you need fermenting, you need enzymes. There are many different industries that involve enzymes, and they all have very different regulatory pathways. So it's not a case that you can just set up a vat and you make an enzyme for the vaccine manufacturing industry. It needs certain health requirements and regulation. So we have 2 very good speakers. They both came through the Launch Lab system that all the fellows are now on. So these are 2 graduates of the program a very long time ago, Ross, 3 years ago. They now have companies employing 10 to 15 people and are selling product across Africa. So we're going to hear their stories and the kinds of things they ran into, the challenges, but also to address some of the opportunities they see in Africa. And 2 of them are the projects that you're working on them today. So Immobazyme have the diabetic foot ulcer project, and Fluorobiotech, it's the alginate lyase project as well. So we're going to kick off with Fluorobiotech. Ross, I've forgotten what your title is, COO, CEO, General Dog Body. So you have 20 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much for having me. So yeah, I wanted to sort of direct the talks today towards the African stars and share our journey and our perspective of how the startup was really started and grew. And so unlike, the pictures you'll be learning how to do, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out next slide here. There we go. We're gonna start with a bit of a case study, the mRNA vaccine raw materials. We're then gonna look at Flora's product portfolio and then the biotech or the building blocks that you need in a general biotech, which is really interesting for, I think, where you are with African stars. Then I've asked Etienne, our Chief Quality Officer, if he'd do a short talk on the regulatory NBs. I think regulation is a very important of a piece of a business, but understanding what that actually is the important bit for founders. And then we'll look at enzymes in general and their applications looking forward, and finally end off with the technology's role in this whole thing. So we're starting off a bit differently, as I said, and that is you're going to learn how to pitch in this course that you're doing. You never start with the team, they'll tell you. But I wanted to start with the team today to explain to you that we've been in your shoes. I started working with my co-founder, Dr. van Staden, about 10 years ago. He'd been working in the lab for, I think, 5 years before that already, and he was the postdoc that was my supervisor. And we'd ended up working together on antimicrobial peptides and antibiotic resistance for a very long time. And what we had sort of faced in our research was that we needed to construct a platform to produce the things that we were doing research on because they were so difficult to get into the country. So we already knew this. And that's quite different to what Richard said. Everybody only realized that when the COVID pandemic hit following the mRNA vaccine technology transfer program. This program was established by the World Health Organization and effectively put the mRNA vaccine technology in the hands of vaccine developers in developing countries so that they could now start to develop vaccines against not just COVID, but things like cancer, rabies, RSV, influenza, and many more diseases. It's a new kind of vaccine that's out there. But we already knew, coming from our background, was that there's a risk to this. And that is, when you look at actually manufacturing a vaccine, there are these 3 key raw materials, or recombinant proteins, as we know. Notice how I say raw materials, and you'll learn how to do this in your pitching. It's to include everyone that is not scientific, right? The point I'm trying to make here is that these three raw materials, recombinant proteins or complex raw materials, they don't just account for the majority of the cost, 50 to 75%, but they must be imported from regions with developed biotech ecosystems. And this is not just the case for mRNA vaccines. It is the case for most enzymes used in many different fields across almost all developing countries. And so this boils down to the fact that these critical raw materials, these enzymes, their supply is overpriced and unreliable to see any industry kind of grow from that. The very tools that run our industry are not locally available. They're made in dollars and we're paying in rands. It just doesn't work. And so what we were interested in is how do we get around this? But remember, we'd already had 10 years of experience in this. And so we also realized something else. Even if we wanted to start local manufacture of enzymes, we still need to import enzymes. This is a 40-year-old process that's based on certain fundamentals that were developed a long time ago. And because of the pushy ecosystems they come from, they've never had to innovate in this pipeline. They have, but not much. And so if we wanted to start vaccine enzyme manufacturing, we'd still be dependent on the import of certain enzymes and complex machineries. That means your risk to operations is much higher. And when we stepped back and realized that we hadn't actually been just working on antimicrobial peptides and antibiotic resistance, but we'd been working on a way to simplify the manufacturing process of enzymes so that it ran far more independently. And that's what we wanted. We wanted this reduced process downtime risk in our research, but that's actually a massive benefit to industry or enzyme manufacturing around the world. And in addition to just this fundamental simplification, we saw other benefits like a 25% cost reduction, an 800% increase in the rate at which you can extract your enzymes, and up to 150% increase in yields. And that's something most multinational enzyme manufacturers would be interested in. Now the trick was, after you file the patent, they hand the patent to you on the desk and they say, that's not worth the paper it's printed on. Go out the door, like we spoke about yesterday, and actually provide value to your patent. Go out there and prove that this thing works and add a measurable value to it. And so that's what we've done. We were in the right place at the right time to be included in the World Health Technology Transfer Program run by the MPP, where we were asked to develop all of the production systems that you need for the enzymes Richard has just spoken about. So that would be stuff like T7 polymerase, pyrophosphatase, DNase, RNase inhibitor, vaccine capping enzymes, and 2-O-methyl transferases. And now we're moving into the more diagnostic space where you can think about the PCR tests that you had to run. Those don't just detect COVID. As we know, they detect many other diseases like HIV or HIV resistance. And there we're putting out the polymerase and the reverse transcriptase. What we're actually doing in this whole process, we're not just supplying the enzymes, we are showing major manufacturers that there's a much easier and simpler and more affordable way to produce these things. And that's what we want them to see as a startup. So I want to get into a bit of the building blocks of a biotech business. And I want to really bring across why I think you're in such a lucky position within this African Stars program. So if I can ask any of the stars, what is the one thing that you think a biotech business needs? Any takers? Customers. There we go. So when I built the slide last night, I actually had the founders on the left and the customers on the right. And I thought, let me not do that because everyone's going to read from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And the one thing that I want to get across today, the one fundamental shift you have to make coming out of academia to the startup space is you need to learn how to sell it before you build it. And that starts with your customers. So if we break this down, and it kind of is our journey, is if you start with the customers, you have to ask yourself, what do they want? They require traceability, they expect validation, performance, and regulatory compliance, and they also prefer suppliers with fast response times. I'm happy to share these slides, so don't worry to take pictures. So we'll go over this many times in the course. But when we were out there speaking to clients that wanted these enzymes from us, this was the most important thing to them. And when you want to implement this, when you want to gain trust and consistent quality, you need to implement a quality management system. Okay, that's just a system and a fancy way of us saying we're going to define our standard operating procedures. We're going to develop our certificates of analyses, deviation reporting, and equipment qualification. That is the fundamentals of your ISO or your GMP, right? But there's a core need for a quality management system, and that's operations to standardize. Who is going to do that? Well, people. People are going to do this. You need people to run your quality management systems and your operations. People like trained scientists, operators, and managers who can implement and sustain. All good? Online, can you guys see? Luck. Okay. Okay, no problem. All right, but what you need to run your quality management system, which is the most important thing to your customers or to be customers, are people, right? People need to run your quality management systems. But when you get into what people need, that is a safe, compliant, and scalable environment, which leads me to facilities and infrastructure. So you need a place to be able to run this biotech company. It's unfortunately not like engineering where you can start a computer company in a garage. You need a space that is regulated, and those spaces they need to be capable of manufacture. They must meet things like air quality standards or biosafety levels. They must have safety standards in place and protocols to respond. You need to include controlled zones, and you need to include, well, it enables equipment qualification in a certain position. When you get to the core need of this, that is capital investment, right? Capital investment is funding, and you can get funding from grants, VCs, customers. But to do that, you need vision. And vision needs founders. And that's what you guys are here to learn how to do. Is how do I take this advantage that I have from the universities I've been in, developing technologies that the world hasn't heard about yet? How does that give me a vision to go and build something that is good enough, or that results in a product that is good enough for people to part ways with money in? Now, I know it's a delicate way of looking at it. As scientists, we all think we're here to, contribute to society, and you are. But as Brandon says, we're not doing this for just money. We're doing this for more than money, but we're also not doing it for less than money. So money is a way of sort of measuring this in a sense, right? And the thing about founders is that we don't live on air, unfortunately. So fundamentally, you need customers, which takes you right back to here. And that's the conundrum, or the valley of death that they call it when you speak to the MIT folks. And MIT, they'll tell you that when you're a founder and you're before funding, there's the 3 F's that you need to depend on to get you through this. So remember, your customers as founders don't need to be the same customers as your business. You can depend on family, friends, and fools to get you through this, okay, this fundraising bit here. But those people also hadn't heard of African stars, because the opportunity that sits in front of you for the next 6 to 9 months, as I understand the course length correctly, is you are looked after. You have a place to live, and you don't worry about paying your food. You're not bootstrapping, which means you can focus on the 2 most important touch points to you now, which is building your vision, okay, and understanding your customers. And so I really, if I look back at our journey, when we were here, we were bootstrapping. And that means that you're running a company to start your company. And it is very difficult. And so appreciate what you're in and take that opportunity with both hands, because anything hereafter is going to be rough. But if I continue our journey through this, right, we got to the funding stage. So we got our vision, We got our opportunity. We raised a bit of grant funding, but we ran into this problem, a facility. Now, we spoke to over 60 VCs over the course of, I think it was a year and a half, explaining to them that without a facility, I can't get people. Without people, I can't get a quality management system. And without that, I can't get clients. And they would say to us, well, look, we just don't invest in CapEx. Sorry. And the reason that they gave, and it was a consistent reason, was if I invest heavily into your facilities, right, your facilities and your infrastructure, and you fold, what happens to my investment? And that's where I can say Launch Lab CERI Bio has really stepped up. You see, the university has now built us a facility which we can rent, and VCs have no problem with renting. They quite like that, okay? And that allows us to get people, QMS, and clients. And so within the space of, I think it's the last 4 months, we've managed to steamroll our way through this. We've just sort of finished raising about $500,000. We're in the process of signing 500,000 more. And that's simply just because we've been given a facility to actually do this in. And if we continue along this, another tip I can give you is when it comes to people, the best people that you'll find are the ones that are willing to do internships. And Richard here, not to suck up to Richard, but Richard has done a phenomenal job at connecting us as founders with people who want work experience. You know, when I walk past Launch Lab CERI Bio and I see our interns going at it full steam to get this quality management system, I'm thinking, man, I don't think you guys know how important you are to customers, which literally leads back to my existence as a founder. So when you are on your venture, don't be scared to ask people to come and intern with you, because there's an insatiable hunger out there. I mean, you can think of it. If you want to go get a job, you need work experience, right? There's an insatiable hunger for that. And there's a nice matchmaking to be done between founders that need personnel and interns that need work experience. And trust me, you can speak to our interns, even though I keep telling them it's been slow. You learn a lot as doing an internship, which I'm sure most of us in the room have already done. But then that leads us to the quality management system again. You know, this is the sort of the big barrier at the end that you need to overcome. And so what I did was I would like to invite Etienne on stage just for him to give us a brief about, you know, what is a quality management system actually. Etienne's done this in multiple companies all around the world. You can come up, Etienne, for big companies. And he really changed the way I look at quality management systems. So
thanks, Ross. Yes, so as Ross said, that is quite a big step in any company. We've been on the journey for about 10, possibly 12 months, and we are now certified. I'd say as of May this year, we had our first stage audit with the certification body, and then in July we had our next audit, and then we received our certificate probably a month back. So I think we're all very, very pleased with that. It's when I have that, it was a big tick for us. So I think addressing everybody here, there's probably two spheres. You know, when Ross asked me to chat about this, there's probably two spheres I'd consider in if it's a journey you decided to take in your organization. So the first one is probably more external, and then you've got a lot of internal considerations as well. So external, the first thing we had to consider, and I think possibly you guys too, is who is your market? I mean, that relates to the standard you embark upon, and even, do I want a standard? Do I need to go through that effort? So for us, a previous slide of Ross's, you would have seen we are selling into the diagnostics market. Hence, it falls within medical devices, which means then we had to look very strongly at ISO 13485. So a little bit of a no-brainer for us there. The other aspect to externally, once you have the certificate, it's almost a marketing tool for your organization. I mean, prospective customers will look at your organization and immediately get the impression that what you provide, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, you're delivering something of high quality, which you should do. If you are certified, it's something you should be doing. So prospective customers, good marketing tool. And then the third one, something I found in different companies, but possibly larger companies, but can also affect anybody in a small company, is if you are going to do business with a multinational, you'll find that their raw material, or let's call it supply acceptance processes, are often very, very rigorous. Right, so they're going to ask you for a lot of documents, and often one of those documents is going to be your certification, your certificate. And doesn't mean it's impossible to do business with them, but it's a lot easier if you are ISO certified. So externally, that's the considerations which we looked at very hard. Internally, different matter. I mean, as organizations, particularly small ones, you have to accept going down this path is going to have a cost implication. Right? Those audits I mentioned earlier, each one has a cost. Auditors travel, you've got to pay for that. They want to stay somewhere, you've got to feed them and so on. So there are costs associated. And then also there is time. There's time on your staff. Your staff they have to accept the process. They have to buy into the process. It's going to take more of their time, right? And if they don't buy in, you're already onto a bit of a rocky path. So it is going to impact your resource as well. But the great thing is once it's done and you get through all of that, you do have the tools in place to produce consistent, reproducible products, which is all a customer wants. Whether it's a product or service, there is a degree of reproducibility which the standard by default brings with it. So that's a really good thing. And then finally, I think just on my career, my working journey, I'd like to say in terms of standards, one size does not fit all. That's a really critical aspect to think about. If you look at the Abbotts of this world and you take the standard, you'll find they have dedicated teams doing specific parts of the standard, whether it's, let's call it materials management, purchasing, or so on. There are teams doing that. With us, there's probably 8, 9 of us, of which 4 of our team are interns. That means we have to do things very differently, right? We've got to wear quite a few hats, and we've got to still do that in a compliant fashion. So if you are going to implement the standard, keep that in mind. If you are going to go with a consultant to help with the implementation, be aware of that fact. Use somebody that has the experience of implementation in small organizations. Like I said, it's very different, a small organization and a big organization. If you implement wrong in a small organization, you'll find most of your resource, most of your time is going to be spent running that system. And what's your most important thing is selling product to customers. So just some things we've learned along the way.
Thanks, Etienne. 10 minutes, okay, let's wrap it up. So basically, you just wanted to end off with the different enzymes that are in the field. This is for people that aren't biologists, really. And the point I'm trying to make on the slide is they're used throughout society, right? You can use them in pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, cosmetics, and skincare. And then if you come over to the industrial side, you're looking at food, beverages, detergents, textiles and paper, biofuels, animal. I can't remember what the last one is under that side there. But what the challenge is going to be is it's going to be a technology challenge, right? You're against industries that are well evolved. And so what I want to get across today is that you need to embrace the fact that doing research in Africa has probably forced you to innovate out of necessity. And what that means, that I like to say, is like we're really good at making champagne on a beer budget. And every multinational is going to be interested in how to do their operations cheaper. We need to understand that that can really be a value add for technologies coming out of Africa. And so if I go to our competitiveness, because we weren't chasing and just saying, let's import and go through it, we're changing the way enzymes can be manufactured, which means we have an advantage, which means we can explore something like decentralized manufacturing. We can change the model. We're not producing in one place and sending all over the world. We're producing in many places and trying to send locally. It compounds and becomes very cost effective. And that's the way you need to think about your research. It's not always, geez, am I commercializing what I fought tooth and nail to get in that impact factor 3 or 4? But a lot of the time it can be, how did I get into that impact of 3 or 4 on a fraction of the budget that the rest of the world needed to get there? And that's kind of it from us. Are there any questions? I thought I'd get through it a bit faster. Sorry.
We have our technical gurus sitting on the floor, filling the questions from online. So, thank Betty the lights. So we have time for questions, guys. We've got 5 to 10 minutes. The online questions, you'll see me looking at my phone because Ambi tends to take a photograph of it and send me as a WhatsApp, so I don't forget the question. So do you have any questions to start us off? Ooh, right audience today. Go for it.
Nice presentation, Ross. I just wanted to ask, actually 2 questions, sorry. Already when you go maybe online to people who don't really know this stuff and put mRNA vaccines, there is a lot of misinformation and anti-science there. How do you navigate that? And the second one, being an African company, also working in a space where you have to address health challenges. Some people have a certain stigma. How do you go about that?
It is a good question. For the most part, we haven't faced that much resistance because we've been within the World Health Organization and this MPP transfer program, which means you're surrounded by people with a common vision and an understanding of why these things are important from a scientific point of view and a historical point of view. Where it does get tricky is when you're starting to approach investors, because investors can be independent. A lot of the time they're non-scientists. And then you're talking about vaccines, right? But the point to get across, and that's another thing that I think you'll have to realize as African stars, and I think it's going to come up in the courses, you'll have lovers and you'll have haters, and that's in every business. You're going to have people that want to join you on the journey, and then there are going to be people that want to resist you on the journey. I think if you're doing it for the good, right reasons, that comes through. And if you're doing it with technologies that can not just impact the beachhead market, which is vaccine manufacturing for us, but many, many, many different kinds of industries, people can see that. And remember, you're also not just selling one thing, you're selling a whole value chain. So you're saying, if I start this company, I'm helping people in their lives with healthcare, but I'm also making jobs for the people I employ and all of the people who supply me with all of the reagents I need. Remember, these are complex raw materials. You're not just employing 10 people, you're probably employing closer to 50 people to get you everything you need to put that product out. So it's going to be part of the journey, and it definitely does depend on what you're selling. But for the most part, you'll be surprised as to how in the VC space, receptive people are to new opportunities and having their mind changed. I think out of the 60 investors I spoke to, I maybe had one that had strong opinions about vaccines. And that's actually quite a funny story, but I'll tell you that one afterwards.
Thank you for that talk. My question is, as you talked about supplier reliability, looking at enzymes, and sometimes you need maybe antigens. Let's say you are talking at developing a certain product. Have you found cases whereby some suppliers are not willing to share the antigens or some components of the reagents that you need? Because we know even in vaccine research, some suppliers or companies are not willing to share their antigens for you to study antibodies. Have you found those cases, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, there are lots of those cases, and it's not just with certain sort of products. It will be with the criteria that those products need to meet. And that is really what you need at the end of the day to install into your quality management system to supply them. So they don't even want to share that with you. The trick there is to understand that although that is difficult, once you pass through it, it becomes a moat, right? It's difficult for you, but it's difficult for everybody else as well. And within our field of biotechnology, we know how heavy the quality management system is. And so I spoke to someone from Thermo the other day, and they said, you know, what we see with clients is once we've onboarded them, they're with us for 5 to 10 years. So sure, it takes a year, maybe a year and a half to land that client. But once your products are in their ISO, for example, it is very expensive and very difficult for them to change. So it is 100% difficult, but again, it turns into a moat once you've crossed it. And you don't have to cross it with one customer. You can be strategic about early adopters, and once they adopt, you'll probably find that other people are more willing to adopt and cross that, or allow you a moat that then others need to cross to follow.
Hi, thank you so much for that informative presentation. And so my name is Chanel Molopo, and I just want to mention that I'm a social scientist as well. So with the products that you're making and looking at the economic status of most of the African countries, because these are products that are being produced in Africa for the African population. So my question is, how accessible are these products to the ordinary person on the ground? Would they be able to afford this information? When you talk about be able to afford your products, when you talk about your customers, also just want to understand who is your target market. Is it, you know, high income, like who are you targeting, considering that the majority of the people in Africa are living in poverty?
Yeah, so we are the raw material supplier to your vaccine manufacturers, and your vaccine manufacturers being people like Afrigen or BioVac. Currently, if we look at what happened when COVID hit, we were last on the list. Africa was last on the list to receive those vaccines. And that's because we don't have the manufacturing capabilities that they do. And the thing that makes it difficult is we're trying to establish manufacturing companies in ecosystems that are not as evolved as theirs. And that's why I was saying technology has such an important role to play there, but we have to be the drivers of that technology. We have to realize that there are limitations that we face, that more developed ecosystems do not face, and our tech innovations need to go towards that. Because from a technology point of view, you can localize manufacture from end to end. You're probably going to be not just affordable locally, but way more competitive globally. So in terms of our products, we are trying to reduce the raw material costs so that enzyme manufacturers can be viable in Africa with the current industry or with the current infrastructure available. Currently, there's like a 25% premium they'd need to put on. We'd rather just be we would want that to rather be globally competitive off the bat. But it also means that if there is a pandemic again, we can start to serve ourselves, and we can say, what are the diseases we choose to go after first? So, yeah.
And I will also I want to add on to that question. So I think the debate is even wider than that. It's moving from security of supply as opposed to cost of supply as well. So Africa, it used to be all about cost. Now it's about can we get it? And I was using an example yesterday. South Africa has the most advanced TB testing on the Gene Expert on the Cepheid machines. We are the largest customer in the world because we have TB is a big issue in sub-Saharan Africa. We could not get a COVID cartridge for the Cepheid machine during COVID. There's massive infrastructure and we couldn't use it. So localizing manufacture is really important. It's not just about the price, and being able to get it is probably another element to the argument as well. So Ross, thank you very much. It's a great start off. Thank you. And you can see he's been through the different programs and the BRAIN program for the MasterCard Foundation Fellows, so he can pitch. So we're going to change it to Dom. He's going to talk from Immobazyme. So when I met Dom, these guys are trying to make enzymes to immobilize onto a platform for the sugar industry, which they tried for 3 years and decided that wasn't the market. That wasn't the market they were going to go into. They're actually doing some really cool stuff now in a different sector, and I think it's a really nice comparison to what the Fluorobiotech guys are doing. So, Dom, you get 30 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before I start and go into this, I just want to thank Ross and Etienne for their presentation. It was brilliant, and it's really highlights every single step that you have to think about in a biotech company, specifically in Africa. And I want to touch on the QMS point. We're busy going through the QMS procedure now as well for ISO 13.5 and 22,000. And it really is truly a nightmare. We have over 200 signed SOP and policy documents. Those are policies from how we sterilize our walls to how we clean our light fixtures, how you respond to different types of spillages on the bench. Do you use the orange bottle for biologics? Or do you use bleach? Do you use ethanol? These are all things that you don't get taught at university specifically, and you have to almost invent from scratch when doing it. I also want to touch on the point of infrastructure. We also had to go through the process of developing a lab, moving from the university and out, which I'll briefly touch on. So before I start, I'm going to take a more human approach to the presentation. I'll tell you a little bit what we're doing, and then a journey how we went from students and friends to where we are now by going year by year through our trauma. So to start, I just want to quickly show you a video. This video was filmed about 6 months ago and is no longer valid because since then we've moved to a new facility which we built 2 weeks ago. It was commissioned. It's 5 times larger than the one you're going to see in this video. I hope there's sound, but let's give it a shot. No sound. That's a crowd. Great. So one of the first yeah, sorry. One of the first things you'll notice there is that we had brick walls. Turns out those aren't food grade or medical grade. So that was one of the reasons we left. Brick walls shed dust. Dust ruins products. So we moved to a new facility, which I'll briefly show you at the end. As Ross mentioned, Africa imports all of its biologics. That's not just medicines, that's enzymes, drugs, food and beverage products, industrial products, polymers, proteins, peptides, cosmetics. And it's huge, the issue. And what this ends up doing is making products more expensive to the consumer and having massive supply risks. If you've ever purchased anything from Sigma or Merck, you can wait 6 months to get the product you've ordered. And that's just not feasible for cutting edge businesses on a budget. This is why we exist. Who we are? Well, we're a biotech spin out of Stellenbosch University, just like Ross. That was our team about a year ago. It's almost doubled since then. That was when we raised some money and we were very, very stoked. But our mission is to make biomanufacturing in Africa possible and for Africa. This is our pipeline. It's very similar to Ross. We are completely vertically integrated from end to end. So customers come to us, we design a peptide, a protein, a polymer for them. We have it synthesized, clone it into bacteria, yeast, express, purify, homogenize, purify, package in a freeze dryer, so we lyophilize our product. We then have in-house QC that has a mammalian cell culture lab too. We do in-house endotoxin, sterility, and then we outsource for heavy metals, allergens, and also sterility too for third-party validation. We also have our own in-house marketing and sales team that actually interacts with the customer on a day-to-day basis. But what exactly are we going to be working on, and what do we work on? Well, we make a bunch of things, but what we do is inspired by nature. It's designed by us humans. It's produced by microorganisms, whether that's bacteria or yeast. It's scaled by us. And our goal is to really transform healthcare and how we approach healthcare in Africa. So we started off with a major problem, and this was actually inspired by a family friend, diabetic foot ulcers. So these are open wounds that develop on the lower limbs and are present in about 10% of diabetics throughout their life. Can go as high as 1/3 of diabetics will develop this throughout their life. South Africa has a population that has about 10% of them diabetic. Many of those are not diagnosed, which is a massive problem. 100,000 of those diabetic patients present to primary healthcare facilities, to their doctors with diabetic foot ulcers, and about 10% of those will have a partial or complete lower limb amputation. That's because the wound gets infected, you don't get great blood flow, and typically you also lose sensation in your lower limbs, so you don't even realize how bad the problem gets. The treatment for debridement, which is cutting away the dead tissue, wrapping it up, is about 350,000 Rand per patient. And if you go with an amputation, it's about 5 million Rand per patient that the government spends. And they estimate that about 10,000 to 15,000 people in South Africa have a lower limb amputation every single year. And the government spends about 4 billion Rand across that pipeline. So that's rehabilitation, ambulance visits, doctor's visits, loss of income. So it's a massive problem. About every 30 seconds, someone will lose their lower limb to diabetes, which is horrendous. But what's worse than that is about 50% of those that undergo a lower limb amputation will die within 5 years. And that's due to other comorbidities too, but it just emphasizes how horrendous this problem is. But there is a solution. There's a drug called Heberprot P. It's manufactured by the Cuban Institute of Biotechnology, and it reduces amputation rate by about 99%, and 90% and 99% reduction and closure of that wound. That's fantastic. Except it costs about 350,000 Rand per patient. It's 3 injections a week for 8 weeks. And then due to that cost, although it's registered in South Africa, it's not available just due to the price. So we came in and we said, well, let's develop a biosimilar. The patent expired about 2 years ago. So we did. It's called Regenza. It's a recombinant human epidermal growth factor. These are growth hormones our bodies naturally produce that tell your skin cells to grow, divide, to heal, and to create new collagen. It works wonders, and I'll show you the next slide, but we're coming in at about 10,000 Rand per patient, a massive drop from that 350,000. And at this cost, we believe it's within the realm that the government can afford to buy this and administer to patients in South Africa. The other numbers, obviously, they're massive. We don't often like to talk about the revenue that can be generated from healthcare, but it's always something you got to be aware of when you raise venture capital funding, like we do. So we manufactured this. It took us about a year to get it right. This picture here is a little bit cut off at the end, but on the left and the right are human skin cells. They're called HiCat cells. We grow them in our mammalian cell culture lab into a monolayer, almost like a layer of skin. We then cut down the center to make a wound, to simulate a wound in human skin. And then on the left is untreated. On the right is treated with our recombinant human epidermal growth factor. And this little blue line here shows you where the cells are. So on this side, cells, this side, no cells. And after 48 hours, no healing in the untreated and full wound closure in the treated. So it works. And we've had this validated by third parties. So much so that it's actually being transferred to the cosmetic industry now as well, which at the moment is basically funding all of this research. So it works. What are the next steps? Well, we want to have this approved by SAHPRA. So we're going to be doing phase 1 clinical trials after a GMP production run, which we will outsource. Unfortunately, we are not GMP. That costs about 15 to 20 million Rand. Just for that, it's about 80 patients, about a year. And then we want to go through the whole SAHPRA approval. There's a new paradigm shift in biosimilars across Africa, where we're realizing that phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials aren't giving any more valuable information than just phase 1. So we're ruling those out for biosimilars. It's relatively new. This was published, I believe, in March of this year. And that's to drive new biosimilars moving into Africa. There's also a new policy or a plan that South Africa, SAHPRA, and the Egyptian equivalent is working on, whereby if you get your biosimilar approved by SAHPRA, or in Egypt, you can by default get your drug approved throughout the whole of Africa, similar to how it works in the EU. That's still a working group at the moment, and they're running through a pipeline where they're trying to accelerate a biosimilar to market in about 18 months, and we hope to be a part of that. But as you know, drugs take a long time to get to market, about 10 years, and we have to fund ourselves, fund this research. To do this, we actually manufacture a range of other products, both in cosmetics and food and beverage, and industry. So I actually removed it before, but I'll just briefly tell you about it. That epidermal growth factor used for pharmaceuticals, we are now formulating into a product called SH oligopeptide 1, which is the inky name for epidermal growth factor for cosmetics. So it's currently being integrated into skincare creams in South Africa as an anti-aging, as it stimulates your body to create collagen. There is a warning that to not consume it. We also were reached out about 6 months ago, May, June this year, by a South African food company that has been importing enzymes to make their plant-based milk. One of the things with making plant-based milk is that plant proteins don't like to be soluble at high temperature and low pH. So when these guys were making their oat milks, their almond milks, they realized that when they poured their oat milk into the coffee, it would coagulate and precipitate, kind of looking like off milk. It was perfectly fine. It just didn't look great to the consumer. And since their largest customer are baristas, they had to come up with a solution. So we developed an enzyme for them that we call solulase. It's a recombinant protein glutaminase. And what it does is it modifies the external surface of proteins, pulling off the glutamine residues and converting them to glutamates. That allows products to be soluble at low pH and high temperature. And we're proud to say that will be going to market this month. It was a fantastic run. From conversation with the customer on the 5th of May, we had the prototype in their hand 3 weeks later, and they did a commercial run 1 week later. That was that entire pipeline from start to finish. There was a lot of regulation involved with that. We followed every South African guideline for manufacturing this product, health, safety, ISO 22000 standards. We delivered to the customer and said, hey guys, where's your kosher certificate? So we had to go back to the drawing board, change our chemicals, and now we're very proud to say that we're going to be getting halal and kosher because this is a food product. But to the journey. We started our journey in 2018. Myself, Ethan, and Nick, who had fantastic hair in honors. We met in undergrad, became friends in our honors. This is our honors class at the Institute for Plant Biotechnology. And in that year, we met a lot at the local pub, Bohemia, and we realized that we wanted to do a biotech company. Didn't know why, didn't know how, but we knew we wanted to. So following year, in 2019, we started our masters, also at Stellenbosch University. And in 2019, COVID happened, which was the perfect driver for us to start creating a biotech company. So in 2020, we spun out of the university. We launched Immobazyme. We started developing our first prototype. Over here, along with Louis, Ethan's cat, we had to build our own equipment because we couldn't afford the equipment we required to purify protein at the scale we were making it. So this was actually built in his kitchen floor because it was locked down and we couldn't go to the lab. So we then finished our second year of masters, probably the best thing we did that year, but we made virtually no real progress on the company itself. Following year, following 2 years, 2021 and 2022, we raised our first bit of VC funding. It was a 3 million Rand co-investment from half from Ethan's mom and half from a VC firm. We're very proud to announce that as of about last week, we've done a secondary buyout of our angel investor who made about a 3-fold return on an investment in 4 years. So it's something we're really, really proud of. We were, once again, we didn't have our own laboratory. So we were incubated at the Institute for Plant Biotechnology, where we did our honors, and at Launch Lab. Throughout this time, we demonstrated our first recombinant protein, which is commercially viable. Nick's actually holding our first plate with our first result ever, looking very excited. And through that process, we started gaining traction, specifically with customers. The following year, we hired our first staff. So it was the 3 of us for 3 years. And we decided it was time to take the leap. So we grew our team by 5. This is them here. This was the last picture we took at the Institute for Plant Biotechnology. It was a brilliant place, but we had spent about 10 years there as students. And then when we were starting the company. This is Yuchan and myself with our first ever paying customer in the paper and pulp industry. We did a 150-ton trial at the facility up in Joburg. It was the most traumatizing experience of my entire life. And I don't think I've actually gone back ever since. Ethan goes in my place. We were wearing full suits because we were working with full glacial acetic acid, a ton of it at a time, and we would fall into tanks of it. It was a nightmare. So I still have nightmares. But that was our first commercial partnership. It's where we started generating revenue. And what we realized then is that we were quite certain we could raise VC funding to go further. But VC, as Ross says, they don't want to put money into equipment. So every cent of revenue we made, we bought equipment. Just spent every cent. Terrifying. And our investors were saying, where's all your money going? We would have to tell them into equipment. So throughout this pipeline, we actually set up our R&D pipeline. How do we make the product? How do we interact with customers? How do we deliver something that works? But with all that traction, we were able to raise another 14 million rand in VC funding. We hired 3 more scientists, and we also built our first facility. It was 250 square meters, and that was that facility you saw in that video. Fully equipped end to end. We hustled to get the equipment. We would go knock on Roche's door and ask if they were throwing anything away. We'd repair their equipment and install it. But throughout that, we managed to file our second patent. We also then produced 3 new commercial proteins. So we were really, really proud of that. It took us 4 years to get to 1 protein. Then it took us 6 months to get to 3. And now we're doing about 14 every 3 months. Our R&D team is fantastic. This year, well, as of last week, we raised another 25 million rand through VC. And on the right here, this was taken about, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. This is us moving into our new facility. We had 6 massive trucks moving our equipment. On the left-hand side here, you'll see our R&D lab that we built. It's 4 times larger than our previous one. And on the right, where these trucks are going, will be going our clean room, which I'll show you in the next slide. But we were able to launch 3 new commercial products this year. That's Solulase, the enzyme I told you for plant-based milk, SH oligopeptide 1 for cosmetics, and Adhes, which is our product for the paper industry, which is flying. So that's really fantastic. And then this year, we were also able to validate our first biosimilar drug that we're working on, Regenza. That's the pictures we showed you. So this is the lab as it's going up. With all the equipment, it actually looks fantastic. But what's coming up next? Well, in about January next year, we start putting up our clean room. This is a GMP grade A clean room. As you can see, it's got a fill and finish it there, lifted off the floor, double walled. And this is where we're going to be developing our first drug in Africa, for Africa. And as far as we're aware, it'll be the first biosimilar ever produced and manufactured on the continent, which we're really, really proud of. So we're at the moment going through ISO 22000 and ISO 13485, and hopefully we'll begin a process of GMP towards the end of next year. This is our management team. Management was our first hires that just didn't leave, so they've all been promoted up. We're really, really proud of this team. Since then, we've grown by another 4. We currently have 4 interns in the facility, all of which I believe will be getting a permanent contract. So I just want to thank everyone. I'll welcome any questions. And I would like to also thank Stellenbosch University, Danielle Strauss, who's also our VC funder, and our advisors. Thank you.
Testing. So as interesting as the story of Immobazyme was the story of your hair and your caps, Ethan. So we have time for questions, guys. You see 2 very different examples in a similar sort of industry. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. There's questions that have come in online as well, which I will get on my phone. Who's going to kick us off?
Hi, my name is Megan and I'm an African Stars Fellow. Lovely talk, by the way. I just wanted to know, how did you find your first clientele? What was your marketing strategy when you first started? Because usually as a biotech company, I'm sure this is the most daunting part.
100%. Honestly, our network, by far. We tried marketing, we tried Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads. It was really hard to convince anyone to take you seriously when it was the 3 of us. So what we did is we leaned very, very heavily on our network, the university, our advisors, our mentors, the friends we had made along the way. And that's every single client we have came through that network. So our very first client was the Coruscant Group, which is a massive paper and pulp company in South Africa. They were put in contact with us through Stellenbosch University. They actually approached the university and said, do you guys have a solution to this? And they said, well, we have a startup that has a solution to that. The same with the cosmetics companies. Those are through networks, through our venture capitalist firms that funded us. But yes, so we do have a dedicated marketing sales team. They're brilliant. And what they do basically is they find all potential customers. They then identify the gatekeepers in those companies. The hardest part is actually just getting through the front door. So they identify gatekeepers, find out their favorite chocolate, and then we email and try and get in there. It's really, really difficult to find new customers, and it's even harder to convince them to pay you. With the product we made for the food and beverage industry, although it took us 3 weeks to do that entire hard scientific pipeline. It took us 5 months to convince them to buy it. That's small scale trials, large scale trials, commercial trials, then regulation, certification, going back and forth on pricing. So that was by far the hardest part of this entire journey. Making science work is actually quite easy.
And the chocolate currency.
The best currency.
Any other questions before I go to online questions?
Yeah, two questions. Yeah, and what's the importance of having a good ecosystem here at Stellenbosch with Launch Lab? Yeah, and then the second one, you also highlight what's the importance now, what we are doing now with the CERI Bio to start providing, ISO accredited labs to startups, and so just you to comment on that, and why here in the Western Cape, because we have lots of successful companies that produce enzymes, and we had a very large exit a few years ago, a company that was bought for close to $500 million, the Kappa Biosystem. Why can we do biotech and enzymes in the Cape?
Well, that's a lot of questions, but I'll start with the ecosystem question first. I think the main thing we get from the ecosystem, other than just connection, shared experiences. So there's an event held every 3 months called Biotech and Beers, where basically all the biotech companies in the Western Cape get together and just decompress, share their experiences, and that's really great. People also do move between the companies. So the ecosystem is vital. I mean, finding products that we don't have to make ourselves that other companies make, that's fantastic. The ecosystem also drives the best talent around the country to the Western Cape, because we're seen as the Silicon Cape. This is where all the biotech companies are. And because of that, all the best biotechnologists from around the country want to move here. And that ecosystem really is an advert for that. When it comes to CERI Bio, I wish you had built it 3 years ago. When we were first starting up and we couldn't get a lab, we just wished the university had one. We went through the process of designing and kitting out and finding the supplies for the equipment, but there was just no desire at the time. And I think CERI has really catalyzed that and driven it and built it. And I just wish we were there earlier, because it would have saved us a lot of money and time. Also, the learnings. We're learning all of this ourselves from scratch. How does the lab set up? Where does the air handling go? What is the optimal amount of light and flooring? What type of floor? Is it epoxy? Is it polyurethane? All these things we didn't know, and you guys know it, and you set it up beautifully over there. So I wish that we were there earlier, but I'm also so stoked for all the new students coming up through the university that's going to have the opportunity to move there. And you'll see, and Ross mentioned it, the interns, they have a place to go now, and it's really, really cool. So yeah, sorry, did I answer the questions correctly?
Yeah. Why you highlight in the Cape that people is just coming here? So just to open to that, because that's one question that we are discussing with the MasterCard Foundation. So we have a strong ecosystem, and we really believe that we should build here. How could we then replicate in other countries? How can we support the fellows as they go back to start creating an ecosystem? And also, what's the importance of them to also come with a strong network from here?
That's a great question. So I just want to touch on one thing on the Western Cape. One of the great things about the Western Cape is WesGrow. So they're an organization, I believe they're funded by the Western Cape government, whose sole purpose is to support and assist companies in the Western Cape. So for example, we sat down with Mundi, who's a representative from WesGrow, and she said, who are the gatekeepers? What companies do you want to get into? Are you having a problem with Eskom? Is it a municipal issue? And they find you the right people to solve those problems. And I don't think anywhere else in South Africa has that. So WesGrow is fantastic. And if you are going to be based in the Western Cape, lean on them. Their KPI is to help, and they're fantastic.
And I think the only thing that I could really add to why we would be in a position to help is because it's not like mistakes haven't been made, right? It takes a long time to learn what the challenges are in developing ecosystems, accept those challenges, and then test mechanisms that get around those challenges, and not just around them, but puts you in front of the rest. So if we were to help other countries start up places like the Launch Lab, there's a playbook. You know, Dom and I can both stand here and say, man, it was really difficult to raise VC funding because of not having a lab. And if you want to start health techs, a stepping stone lab is the main catalyst. There's a few pillars that we could very easily highlight to you, and one of those pillars would be the lab. And you wouldn't have to set up an ecosystem that then struggles because of a bottleneck for as long as what we probably had to beta test this thing around for. So yeah, I think there's a lot of transferable knowledge, and I also think programs like this allow us to just speak to our neighbors. As crazy as that sounds, I've realized going overseas that Africa needs to do more business with Africa. And the only reason I don't is because I don't know anyone else from Africa, because I haven't visited. But I got a great opportunity after our accelerator program. I got an opportunity to do Open Startup, which took me overseas, I think 6 times in the last 18 months. It's brain program. Yeah, it's not for profit. So it's only a benefit to me. I think the number they gave me the other day was $85,000 that they had personally put into my enrichment and my traveling. And while I was doing all this traveling, I was being coached on how to interact, understand what I was doing, how to talk to people. But we also realized that, we've got a hell of a strong network just within Africa that we don't lean on. We're not, and I always thought this was a South African problem, where all these cool things are happening, but you never hear about it until you kind of wander into it. I think that's happening across Africa. We're not formalized. We aren't holding conferences within Africa. Maybe we are. I've never been invited to them. Maybe we need to do more of that. But I do feel that there's a lot more connections that can be made, and programs like this, programs like Brain, are starting to walk that journey, and I think there's a lot of value. Do I have 2 minutes, Richard? 2 more minutes. Are we over time?
I was going to chime in. This comes back to some of the discussions we were having this morning with our MasterCard Foundation colleagues. Is there are a number of activities going on in Africa, not the same, but related. So the Brain is one. But I think part of the job that we have through the fellows as well, because some of you were fellows in other programs before this as well, is connecting some of these up so you create ecosystems that are joined up. One of the challenges we have in Africa, and I'm going to beat this drum, and I'm sorry, MasterCard Foundation, you hear it a lot. A lot of the challenges we have with funders is that a lot of funders come in and want to do their own thing, and they actually cut all other funders out. So you actually silo the students, and you limit the kind of interaction. So that's one of the things we can definitely challenge in this room is how do we bring some of these together? On the program such as this, the STARS program, which is the Pasteur Institute Dakar, and here. First of all, how many funders do you know that have funded programs in French and English-speaking countries? This is the first one I've ever seen. So, and that's already unique. And how do we take it to the next level? Juliet, was exactly the same question somebody has just asked: is how do we make sure this isn't a Western Cape thing? This is an African thing. We are just showing you 2 projects from the Western Cape today because we didn't want to fly in speakers just for today's session from around the continent, while we're talking quite heavily skewed towards the Western Cape. There was another question for you, Ross. I'll put down on the floor here. Thanks for the great presentation. May I ask what generally differentiates your cost-effective manufacturing technology from others? And that's from Siko.
Yeah, so our fundamental technology simplifies manufacturing, which is a differentiator. But what you can do with the new technologies, you can build on it and compound. So because you can now fully localize all the enzymes you need for enzyme manufacturing, that reduces the cost a lot. But because you're now doing it in South Africa, in a developing country where I don't want to say you pay people less, but you do pay people less for the same quality of life that you would pay a scientist in the States, your product is actually quite more affordable. Funny enough, one of the major drivers is the cost of people in doing these things. The one story I just wanted to quickly touch back on, and it goes back to the previous question. I was flown to MIT or Boston, and we were having a meeting at the Engine, which is the world's biggest biotech accelerator. And I'm ready to. I've been trained for a year, and I'm giving my elevator pitch, and I'm pitching to someone very senior at Harvard. And halfway through the pitch, he stops me and says, I would never take a vaccine from Africa. I'm not interested. Okay, I step down, but right next to me is a colleague, also within the Brain program from Tunisia. His name is Bilal. And Bilal starts to pitch and he says, what we do is we use AI to enhance free Google images to detect pipe leaks. And Bilal also was cut off. So this professor quickly tells him, look, we've been doing that for the last 5 years. In fact, you see that institute across the road, that whole institute is doing exactly what you're talking about, and we're down to 1.6 mile resolution. That means a pixel on the screen represents 1.6 miles. And Bilal turned around and said, oh, we're from Tunisia, a group of 2 guys, and we're at 5-meter resolution. And the color fell out of the sky space. So yes, there is preconceived ideas, but going over and experiencing it and getting the opportunity to meet other people that are doing these difficult deep tech things in Africa is very, very important. It falls into part of the pipeline. You know, African stars are here. They're following the journey that Dom and I took, where we do the basics of business, and then you get out the door, and you do that through accelerator programs like Open Startup or the others that are available.
Last online question so far is, I think for both of you, if you file IP, did you only file in South Africa or was it global?
Yeah, we filed globally. Dom, I'm not sure.
Think about we filed both locally and internationally, but with all of our new tech, we don't file patents anymore.
Why?
It's
if you don't have the money to defend your patent, why have a patent? Because if some big guy wants to copy you, they can, and no legal system is going to protect you if you don't have the cash to do so. So we don't bother anymore.
And if you look at all the pickier stuff, so we're getting technical now. So you have different ways to produce proteins. E. coli was like the one system that was used for most of the time, where everything was patented. When you look at pickier, they don't even patent. And these are, again, multinational organizations. They've realized it's better just to keep quiet, because as Dom's just said, how do you know that these people are using your technology, and how then do you enforce? It's very difficult. Yeah.
Any final questions? Yes, Constantia.
Thank you both for incredible presentations. I'm a retired scientist. I didn't have the patience, so I changed careers a little bit. But my question, I guess, is for you guys to maybe reflect a little bit in terms of the scale of opportunity that's available for young people. So even to the point of, it takes quite a long time, or I mean, you're all trying to reduce the timelines of getting these products out. But I can imagine if I'm a young scientist and sometimes I'm balancing between this thing I'm really passionate about and I'm trying to develop and move forward, but my parents put me through school and they're expecting me to be putting food at the table, right? And science isn't always friendly to that approach. So based on your own experiences, based on hopefully working with young people in your startups, what are some of the things to think about, to reflect on for young?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest realization was that in science, most of the time, for biological science specifically, is an academic degree and not a professional degree. And that is because we do not have the industries developed yet for this. And unfortunately, I don't think we're told that off the bat. So in my case, and a lot of the people that I studied with's case, we got to the end of honors or masters, and you're looking at 12,000 Rand a month with the non-masters. And that job is really difficult to get. Now, that doesn't discredit the importance of the degree. What we're learning to do here is like health security fundamentals. But what we don't really get a lot of, or get exposed to, or even just a mindset change, is that if you're going on to do an M or a PhD, you should, in Africa, in my opinion, start thinking about, am I doing this to start something? You know, I'm already so over the level of what I need to be employable overseas. If I'm going on to further this research, I need to be sure that it is research that is going to be able to get to the market and change my local ecosystem. I came to university because I wanted to contribute. And it was really difficult for me when I sort of had my MSc and I just couldn't contribute other than, you know, going and working for a really small amount of money that's probably not viable to even live at all. But if someone had told me earlier that I would have the opportunity to start a company and to actually build the industries and health facilities we need, I would have had a different mindset better on. I think what Dom did early was, that he saw the opportunity and got out earlier. I stayed all the way till the end of the PhD, and I look back and I was like, geez, what did I really achieve in these last 5 years? Because my skill set peaked. So I'm not saying don't do a PhD. I'm saying our young people are going to need to learn how to leverage everything they can. And if it means doing a PhD or a postdoc to get there, that's fine. But have a very clear idea of what you're doing it for. If you're doing it thinking you're going to get a better job, well, go and find what are the names of the businesses that are going to offer me this job. And if they don't exist, okay, then this is an academic degree. And what are my chances really of becoming a lecturer? And do I even want to do that? But don't discredit the opportunity that you have in front of you, which is maybe a bit more of a chaotic environment, but there's opportunity in chaos. You just need to learn how to align things and utilize it. I think we're just not telling people what needs to be done, actually.
If I could add briefly to that, one of the things that we realized, we put up a job post last year for a single hire, low-level junior intern. We had 800 applications in 1 week, and all of them had masters and PhDs. Yeah.
There's a
huge. So first thing is we need more companies. There's only so many people that we can absorb, and even in just this tiny ecosystem, we need 100 times more biotech startups just to absorb the talent that we have here, and we really have crazy talent. And then the other two things are probably philosophical changes. So the first thing is that when we started putting up job posts, we said bare minimum master's degree, and that's because we went through the pipeline and we were like, you need a master's degree to figure this out. And then with Richard's help, we got a bunch of interns from the South African Medical Research Council. Some of them only had an undergrad degree, one had an honors. And within about a month, we knew that they were going to be staying in the company. They blew our entire mind. So philosophical change on what do you actually need to have a degree in to actually be brilliant at your job? And they truly are brilliant. So we need more companies and we need more chances. And one of the beliefs that we have is that no one is allowed to intern at Immobazyme unless we or someone else pays them to do so. No free internships. And that's why I want to thank Richard for providing us 2 brilliant interns who both have salaries that are much better than that 12,000 Rand a month. And that was all led by you. So thank you so much on that. If Heath, my COO, would like to say something.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. 10 years ago, when we were sort of in the middle of our degrees, the ecosystem didn't exist pretty much at all. And since then, the government subsidies that are getting involved, the programs with the CSIR, UVU Africa, African STARS, South African Medical Research Council, have created the quaternary sector in our economy that really did not exist before. And so it's better than it's ever been. We're forever going to rely on the government to help and subsidize and make the platforms available, but also these programs. The African STARS program, the UVU programs, the CSIR programs. We have a scientist that went to South Korea for a GMP course. She did pretty much the equivalent up in Pretoria. And she said the Pretoria one wiped the floor. It's of international standard. It's far better than what you can get out there. And so just access to those programs, and then it funnels into our companies, into larger companies such as Afrigen and Biovac and Lasec. Even the opportunities are growing now, but we can definitely pick things up a little bit, and just highlighting the fact that the government getting involved is opening the doors.
I can bring the session to a close, and also a little bit of a story. So we were, in relating to some of the discussions we had earlier, I'm hosting a meeting with funders in a month's time, and then I'm setting the agenda. And 2 other funders came to me as we want to put on a session because we want to talk about a capacity development program we're doing in Africa. And I said, well, can you tell me about it? No, it's the best program. We've got the best this, we've got the best that. And I said, well, I'm also involved in a really good program too. So what makes your program better than our program? So a lot of the funders are also working in the space. I firmly believe that between us in the room, the fellows in the room, between the trainers and the funders as well, we have a real role to play in pulling these things together. There are some funders who only fund equipment purchase, or never in these meetings. There are some funders that, yeah, but they exist. And then you go to them and say, well, we've got this huge training program, so we didn't know about it. It's like, well, can you tell us how it works? Yeah. So joining the dots between funders is going to be very important, and I think that's a good lesson. So I'm going to bring this session to a close. I don't think there are any more questions online, Ambi. Before you, where are you? There's one more. Oh, geez, I need my glasses. Sorry, guys. And question from Siku again. Can I ask the speakers if they had any experience